Jayden, take me back to the earliest memory you have of realizing that money could transform your life. How did that realization shape the path you're on today?
Wow, that's a great question. Okay, so coincidentally, that coincides with my earliest memory in life. So my earliest memory was the first day of kindergarten, and my dad walked me to school, and I remember he had a cigarette in one hand, and he was saying, and he dropped me off with the empty book bag. He said, "Listen here." If your teacher asks you for your school supplies, tell her I don't get paid till Friday. So she's just gonna have to wait till Friday. And I remember okay, being a kid, okay. And then I get into class and the first day, she's going down school supplies to make sure we have everything that we need for school. And everybody else has everything, and I don't have what I need. And so, of course, I raised my hand and I let her know. My dad said, "You gonna have to wait till Friday because he'll get paid till Friday."
You did what he said.
Right. And then people started laughing. And then that really had me thinking, like, something about this isn't right. Right. And that was the beginning of feeling a sense of lack. Like there was what I wanted in life. And I oftentimes got to know because we didn't have enough money or we were broke. That was the mentality that I was taught as a kid. And so as an adult, in adulthood, I had to retrain my brain and get out of that lack mindset, especially as a business owner. It's one thing to think that way as an employee, but as a business owner, you have to change that mindset.
I had a very similar upbringing in that we just didn't have money growing up, and it was one of those things where I felt like it put these artificial ceilings on me where I remember thinking like $30,000 a year salary was like $1 million. Like it just seemed like so much money to me. Do you feel like you had like these artificial ceilings growing up as well, where you had put these like mental limits on yourself?
Definitely. I remember being in high school, and one time a teacher told us to do an assignment where we had to find a job and like find a job in the field that we wanted to be in, and do like a write up on it. And I found an accounting job. It was a bookkeeper job, and it was around that $30,000 mark. And she was like, "A bookkeeper, that's it? You need to aim higher than that." And I'm looking at her like, "What are you talking about? This is $30,000. This is a lot of money."
Sure.
And it that what she's told me stuck with me. Like I still hear her voice to this day. She passed away, unfortunately, a few years after that. But I understood. I definitely understand where she's coming from. And I put that same type of energy when I'm working with my clients.
What did you do to remove these limits? I do wonder, like, how do you? Because it's not easy getting past that.
Hmm.
It's really not. I mean,
Right.
so what in your career have you done to remove those, or have there been other experiences in your career that have helped you along the way that maybe you got guidance from a mentor or something like that? So how were you able to remove those limits?
Yeah, I think removing the limits happened in phases. So, as I was a child, I always knew the middle class life wasn't for me. Let's just be 100%
Sure, yeah.
honest. The living paycheck to paycheck, going to the grocery store and having a budget of only $100 to feed a family of five, none of that resonated with my spirit. I knew something with that just was not right. And then I'm a very logical person, right? So statistically, when you look at even crime, we're looking at crime happening in usually lower income areas, right? So that was step one. Then I realized I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. And it's interesting because you have every income bracket. And in my zip code specifically, you had the middle class life, which was us living paycheck to paycheck, but living in a house with the front yard and a backyard. Then you have people who are living in mansions, which I can walk to, which is might be three people in a 7 bedroom house. Then maybe across the street from that, you have seven people living in a 3 bedroom apartment, right? And it was so interesting to me, all of this being so close and not far, like really segregated. And as a child, I always thought, what was so different from the people that live in mansions than the people that lived in the apartments. Like, what did those people do differently in their lives that these people didn't do? And I remember when I would ask for things, like I remember asking for a Sega Genesis and it was $100 and my dad said I don't have it. And I'm just thinking in my head like, good, just go make more money. Like, you're a
Yeah.
grown man, make more money. I don't understand, right? So that was the phase in my childhood of breaking barriers. Then let's fast forward to me actually starting my business. Um, I I did coaching from day one. So a lot of people who shift um from being an employee to an employer that don't do any type of coaching, they will take longer to see success. That is 100% fact. And so one of the things that I learned in coaching was to have a niche market and to be a professional, and that you can have $1 million firm. That was always the notion that I was bred to believe from day one. So my first client was a CFO client, paid me $4,000 a month. Now, after that, I'm not gonna lie. I did have, for a year and a half, I did have a lot of low value clients as I was trying to figure out what that niche market was for the first 2 years. However, I knew even with that $4,000 a month client, I'm like, this is $4,000 a month, but this is taking 40 hours a week out of my time. I can't build a business working 40 hours a week on one client.
Sure.
And so then I just, through trial and error, learned that I needed to diversify, I needed to hire, I needed to delegate in order to break through the limits that my peers have around me, because it's difficult in the law space. You have a lot of these lawyers that are making tons of money in their first few years. In the CPA world, that's not a thing. CPAs are very undervaluing themselves oftentimes. And so I didn't have a lot of peers around me that were doing the things to have a high value firm, but I knew that that's what I wanted.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the coaching, because the
Hmm.
coaching is, I'm very curious as to how you decided to go with a coach right from the beginning, because that's one of those things that you don't learn typically when you are in a lower income bracket.
Hmm.
That's something that you learn when you're like in a higher bracket. Like your parents are like doctors or lawyers, and they're like, hey, this is important. But so my dad was a mechanic, so it's like my dad didn't know that stuff, didn't pass that on to me. Luckily, I was introduced to enough great people in my career where I was like, you need to get a coach. So I have a coach. I've had a coach for a while. So how was that introduced to you, and how did you know so early? Because that's sort of an advanced thing when you're just starting out.
Well, I actually got hooked on a sales funnel, a Facebook funnel. So
That's fantastic.
the classic free webinar, I'll show you how to do it, and then they do the sale at the end. Yeah. So I've done that myself,
Sure,
and it's
yeah.
worked. And I know that, and it worked to get me in. So a good Facebook ad. So that's why I still promote to this day. I say businesses should really be looking at using meta ads, because you get such a higher ROI versus a billboard where, okay, you have this billboard, but people cannot stop their car in the middle of the highway and put your website or your phone number in their phone.
Or
Versus
click it or anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus on a Facebook ad, they click your lead magnet, they opt in. Now you can legally call, text, and email them, and they're on your list. So even if they were not in a car accident today, 3 to 12 months from now, when they are in a car accident, because they're getting your weekly newsletter, you're top of mind.
Yeah, so a buddy of mine, he runs an SEO company. His name's
Hmm.
David Haskins, and he was showing me. He sent me a screen share of a video. It was a video screen share of his phone, and he is intentionally trying to feed Facebook's algorithm about like car crashes and try to see how many injury lawyers would pop up,
Hmm.
and it was full. It
Hmm.
was wild, like because the algorithm's gotten way better. I guess if
Yep.
you're intentionally feeding it, it's gonna. But
Absolutely.
it is wild how effective Facebook has gotten when it comes to their ads.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And along with coaching, I have worked with a lot of coaches. At this point, I have spent probably over $300,000 on coaching and consulting. Um, and it has definitely fast forwarded the track for me to get to that $1 million mark. Now that I have $1 million firm, I will say I am less stressed now than I was when I was only making $250,000 a year. $250,000 a year was like the worst time of my life.
Sure. So let me ask you about the coaching a little bit more
Hmm.
about that, because there's kind of like different types of coaching.
Yes.
Like there's some like nuts and bolts type coaching.
Hmm.
Okay, you're a CPA, you're a lawyer, you do this, 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 and this.
Hmm.
Or there's the more of like I'd say the more of the performance type where tries to get you past like the mental blocks. And like,
Hmm.
so my coach is Jason Selk, Dr. Jason Selk. He's the former performance coach for the St. Louis Cardinals. He's very successful. He represents a bunch of athletes. And it was one of those things where I was introduced to him almost by accident. And I didn't realize I needed to get past some of those mental blocks. And that's where he's helped me. So he doesn't really give me the nuts and bolts. He gives me more like the mental blocks. Get out of my own way. So I am wondering, like, which kind of way did you head when it comes to coaching? And have you tried different coaches over the years? Have you found one way is more effective than others?
To your point, I think coaching is customizable and different people go to coaching for different reasons. I'll speak for me personally. I have a therapist that I go to for my mental blocks who works with high performers and things of that nature. I think a lot of people go into coaching for the money mindset. That wasn't my issue.
Yeah.
From day one, I knew I was meant to be rich, okay? And working 80 hours a week and getting paid barely minimum wage was not the life that I was meant to live. So for me, I felt like whatever shortcomings or shortfalls or wherever I feel like I don't have the expertise in yet, let me find somebody that has that expertise that can teach it to me. And I am a high performer, and high performers thrive on learning new information. So as I was going through the CPA process it's brutal. It's like pledging a fraternity. When people pledge a fraternity or sorority, it's like a 10 to 13-week process.
Right.
When you become a CPA, it's like doing that process 4 times, okay? So, when I went through that process, as excruciating it was very rewarding, and that's where I really feel like the idea of me having my own firm was birthed because I learned so many different new ways to serve clients. And so from there, I started reading. I read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, and all of that is great. But there's a level of self-sufficiency that I know that I'm capable of, and there's a level of, okay, how about I get somebody to help me implement this? So I've been through leadership coaching. I knew one time when I had cussed out my staff in a staff meeting that would at that point something needed to change. So that's when I prompted for leadership coaching. When I became a Profit First professional, there's a Profit First coach that they give you. I worked with a coach, Darnielle Harvey, Darnielle Harvey, who really helps service-owned businesses shift from 6 to 7 figures and do it with ease. And also, she helped me learn how to do live events. So I do retreats for lawyers, and so working under her, I learned that. And then there's been other coaches along the way, but anything where I feel like I do a great job of assessing shortcomings for other businesses. And as I'm doing that, I'm also thinking to myself, maybe this is something that I need to improve on myself.